The breaking point. The Zaldaxian ambassador's laughter echoed through the United Nations Galactic Affairs Chamber, each melodious chuckle like a slap across humanity's collective face. "You misunderstand, Director Ramirez," Ambassador Drelk said, his 7 eye stalks quivering with amusement. "We aren't suggesting Earth's application for the Galactic Council is premature. We're stating it's fundamentally absurd." Director Haruto Ramirez maintained his composure with practiced diplomatic skill, though his knuckles whitened as he gripped the podium. This was humanity's 17th rejection in 43 years. Perhaps the Council could clarify what specific benchmarks Earth has failed to meet, he asked, keeping his voice level. Ambassador Drelk exchanged glances with the Varelian and Nixtari representatives, triggering another round of poorly concealed mirth among the alien dignitaries. "Director," the Zaldaxian finally responded, "the youngest species on the Council achieved planetary engineering capability 6,000 years ago. Your kind still struggles with basic climate regulation on your only world." He gestured dismissively, with 3 of his limbs. "You haven't even managed to terraform your neighboring planets into habitable states." "Mars colonization is proceeding on schedule," Ramirez countered. "And our asteroid mining operations, our primitive extractions that barely qualify as interplanetary industry," interrupted the Varelian ambassador, her bioluminescent skin pulsing with patronizing hues of blue and violet. "Call us when you've built something truly impressive, perhaps in another few centuries?" As the alien representatives filed out, their translator devices did little to mask their continuing amusement. Director Ramirez remained motionless until the chamber doors sealed, then slammed his fist onto the console with such force that the holographic display flickered. "That's it," he said to the empty room. "That's absolutely it." 12 hours later, in the underground complex beneath Geneva, designated for Earth's most classified operations, Director Ramirez addressed the 22 individuals who comprised humanity's Shadow Council, the true decision-makers behind Earth's interstellar policy. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "I believe we've reached a breaking point in our galactic diplomacy efforts." Defense Minister Nora Okonkwo leaned forward, her weathered face grim. "Another rejection, I presume?" "Worse than rejection," Ramirez replied. "Open mockery. They're not even pretending to take us seriously anymore." Dr. Tanaka Hiroshi, head of the Global Science Directorate, sighed heavily. At 74, he had personally witnessed 11 of Earth's failed applications. "What exactly did they cite this time?" "Our inability to engineer planets," Ramirez said bitterly. "Apparently, planetary manipulation is the bare minimum for consideration." An uncomfortable silence settled over the chamber until Professor Jackson Reed, the youngest member of the Council at 52, cleared his throat. As Earth's leading expert on hyperdimensional physics, his presence had been controversial when he was first appointed 5 years ago. Now he activated the room's central display. "Perhaps," he said carefully, "we should give them exactly what they're asking for." The holographic display flickered to life, showing a complex series of calculations and schematics that few in the room fully understood. "What am I looking at, Professor?" asked Minister Okonkwo. "Project Prometheus," Reed answered. "A theoretical framework for creating an artificial planet using redirected asteroids, comets, and lunar material." Director Ramirez stared at the display in disbelief. "You're suggesting we build our own planet? From scratch?" "Not from scratch," corrected Dr. Cassandra Williams, Reed's longtime collaborator and head of advanced materials research. "We would use existing celestial bodies as raw materials combined with dark matter manipulation to accelerate gravitational cohesion." Minister Okonkwo's laugh was short and harsh. "And how long would such an absurd project take? 500 years? 1,000. 7 years, Professor Reed stated flatly. The room erupted in overlapping voices, most expressing variations of shock and disbelief. Director Ramirez raised his hands for silence. "Explain," he demanded simply. Reed nodded to Williams, who took control of the display. "We've been developing this concept in secret for nearly a decade," she explained. Recent breakthroughs in quantum gravitational manipulation and dark energy harnessing have changed what's theoretically possible. The display shifted to show the asteroid belt. By harvesting approximately 60% of the belt's mass, combined with directed cometary impacts and specialized gravitational compression, we can create a planetary body approximately the size of Mars. The technological requirements would be astronomical, objected General Viktor Petrova, his Russian accent thickening with emotion. Not to mention the resources. We've done the calculations, Reed interrupted. With global cooperation and the repurposing of our entire space infrastructure, it's achievable. And why? Asked Finance Minister Chung Wei. Would we divert our entire economy toward such a provocative display? Director Ramirez found himself smiling for the first time since the humiliating council rejection. Because it's exactly what they said we couldn't do. Because after decades of patronizing dismissals, we'd finally force them to acknowledge our capabilities. Dr. Hiroshi studied the schematics carefully. The gravitational effects on our solar system would be minimal with proper placement, Williams assured him. We've identified a stable position in the L4 Lagrange point of Jupiter's orbit. Reed expanded the display, showing simulations of the construction process. It wouldn't just be a planet-sized rock. We're talking about a fully engineered world with active core dynamics, a self-sustaining magnetosphere, and atmospheric regulation systems. A technological demonstration unlike anything the galaxy has seen, Williams added. Even the Zaldaxians would be forced to recognize the achievement. The council members exchanged glances, expressions ranging from skepticism to cautious interest. Minister Okonkwo raised the question they were all considering. If, and I stress if, we were to pursue this madness, what would be the first step? Reed didn't hesitate. Immediate repurposing of all lunar mining operations, establishment of large-scale manufacturing facilities in Earth orbit, and, he paused briefly, deployment of the prototype gravitational lensing arrays we've been developing at Ceres Station. The ones that officially don't exist? Clarified Ramirez. Precisely those, Reed confirmed. General Petrova shook his head slowly. The aliens would notice such a massive operation. They would attempt to interfere. Let them try, said Director Ramirez, surprising himself with the steel in his voice. For too long, we've accepted their judgment of our capabilities, their assessment of our worth. Perhaps it's time we showed the galaxy exactly what humanity can accomplish when properly motivated. Finance Minister Chung scoffed. And you believe building a planet will earn their respect? More likely it will trigger sanctions or worse. I don't care about their respect anymore, Ramirez replied. I care about their recognition. After this, they'll never laugh at humanity again. Gradually, the discussion shifted from whether to attempt the project to how it might be accomplished. 2 hours later, Professor Reed and Dr. Williams had answered dozens of technical questions, and a tentative consensus was forming. We would need to inform the public, noted Information Minister Joanna Blaze. Something this massive can't remain classified. Not immediately, countered Ramirez. The initial phases can be disguised as an expansion of our asteroid mining operations. Once we're committed and have demonstrated initial success, then we make the announcement. Dr. Hiroshi, who had been mostly silent during the technical discussions, finally spoke. In my lifetime, I've watched humanity repeatedly beg for acknowledgement from species that achieved spaceflight while our ancestors were still using stone tools. Perhaps, he hesitated, then straightened his shoulders. Perhaps it's time we stopped asking for permission to join their community and instead built something that forces them to join ours. A murmur of agreement spread through the chamber. Minister Okonkwo turned to Director Ramirez. I believe we should put this to a vote, she said. Not just here, but among all planetary governments. Agreed, said Ramirez. But first, let's give it a proper name. Not Project Prometheus, that's too academic. We need something that captures what this truly represents. Dr. Williams smiled. How about New Earth? Since we're literally creating a new world for humanity. Too literal, objected Reed. What about Terra Nova? Ramirez considered, then shook his head. No, If we're doing this, if we're actually building our own planet as a statement to the galaxy, then let's call it exactly what it is. He looked around the room, meeting each council member's gaze. Project Defiance, because that's precisely what we're doing, defying their expectations and their dismissal of humanity. One by one, the council members nodded in agreement. No. Defiance it is, declared Minister Okonkwo. May God help us all. As the meeting adjourned, Director Ramirez remained behind with Professor Reed and Dr. Williams, staring at the simulations still rotating in the holographic display. Can we really do this? He asked quietly. Or am I about to commit humanity to the most expensive folly in our history? Reed's expression was solemn. It will be the most challenging undertaking humans have ever attempted. But yes, Director, we can do this. More importantly, we must. Ramirez nodded slowly, watching the simulation of a new planet forming from scattered asteroids and cosmic dust. Then let's get started. The next time I face the Galactic Council, I want to arrive as the representative of a species that built a planet simply because they told us we couldn't. Project Defiance had begun. The cosmic architects 500 kilometers above Earth's surface, the orbital construction platform Prometheus, stretched nearly 3 kilometers from end to end, a massive lattice of advanced composites and metallic alloys that glinted in the sunlight. At its center, the gravitational manipulation core, humanity's most advanced technology, pulsed with controlled power. Chief Engineer Dominic Wilson watched through the viewport as the latest fleet of automated harvesters departed for the asteroid belt, their ion drives painting blue streaks against the blackness of space. This marked the 300th deployment in 18 months. Project Defiance was consuming resources at an unprecedented rate, mobilizing every aspect of Earth's space infrastructure. Harvester Group Theta-7 successfully launched, reported his assistant, Dr. Eliza Narayan, her voice betraying fatigue. Like most of the project's senior staff, she had been working 20-hour days for months. They'll reach the designated extraction points in approximately 68 hours. Dominic nodded, running a hand through his prematurely graying hair. At 43, he had been relatively unknown before Project Defiance, a brilliant but unremarkable engineer working on gravitational theories at the European Space Agency. Now he directed humanity's most ambitious undertaking. Status update on the core formation? He asked, turning to the holographic display that dominated the command center. Mass accumulation is at 38% of target, Eliza replied. The gravitational lensing systems are performing beyond expectations. We're actually ahead of schedule. Dominic allowed himself a small smile. 300 million kilometers away at Jupiter's L4 Lagrange point, something unprecedented was taking shape. Through the specialized observation arrays, they could see it, a growing spherical mass of asteroids, comets, and processed materials, all being compressed by artificial gravitational fields into an increasingly dense core. Dr. Wilson called out a technician from the communications station. Director Ramirez is requesting an update conference. Priority Alpha. Dominic checked the time and frowned. This wasn't their scheduled briefing. Put him through to my private office. In the small compartment that served as his personal workspace, Dominic activated the quantum encrypted communication system. Director Ramirez's face appeared immediately, the deep lines around his eyes more pronounced than ever. We have a problem, Ramirez said without preamble. Zaldaxian survey vessels have altered course toward Jupiter's Lagrange point. They'll be within direct observation range in less than 72 hours. Dominic felt his stomach tighten. That's too soon. We're not ready for discovery yet. Project Defiance had operated in semi-secrecy for 18 months. The global public knew they were constructing something significant in space, but the full scope remained classified. The alien civilizations had noticed increased activity but hadn't yet identified the true purpose. Options? Ramirez demanded. Dominic brought up the status reports on his tablet. We could activate the diffraction arrays earlier than planned. They won't completely hide the core formation, but they might obscure enough to create ambiguity about our intentions. Do it, Ramirez ordered, and accelerate the Phase 2 compression sequence. If they're going to discover us, I want them to see something that's unmistakably a planet in formation, not just a collection of space debris. After the call ended, Dominic summoned his senior team. For the next 14 hours, they worked frantically to implement the new directives. The gravitational engines were pushed to their limits, accelerating the compression of the accumulated mass. Emergency protocols were transmitted to all harvester ships, redirecting their efforts to critical components. As the deadline approached, Dominic found himself standing beside Dr. Narayan in the observation dome, watching the distant spot where their artificial world was taking shape. Not visible to the naked eye, the specialized displays showed the progress. A protoplanet now approximately 1/4 the size of Earth, with a fully formed metallic core generating its own magnetic field. "They're here," Eliza said quietly, indicating another display showing the approaching Zaldaxian vessels. 17 ships. That's not a survey fleet. That's an investigation force. Within hours, the expected communication arrived. Ambassador Drelk's face filled the main screen. In Prometheus control, his eye stalks rigid with what humans had learned to recognize as shock. "Director Ramirez," the Zaldaxian began, dispensing with diplomatic pleasantries, "explain immediately what we are witnessing." Ramirez, joining via secure link from Earth, smiled thinly. "Exactly what it appears to be, Ambassador. Earth is constructing a planet." The alien's translation device momentarily failed to convert his response, a sign of extreme emotion overloading the linguistic algorithms. When it recovered, his voice carried unmistakable incredulity. "This violates at least 7 interstellar conventions regarding stellar body manipulation. The Galactic Council has not authorized the same council that has repeatedly denied Earth membership?" Ramirez interrupted coolly. "We are exercising our sovereign right to develop our solar system as we see fit. We've carefully positioned our project to avoid gravitational disruption to existing planetary bodies." "This is madness," Ambassador Drelk stated. "Your species lacks the technological maturity to safely—" "I'm transmitting our current technical specifications," Dominic interjected, sending the carefully prepared data package. "As you'll see, our gravitational containment systems exceed galactic safety standards by 30%. The data transfer momentarily silenced the Zaldaxian. When he spoke again, his tone had shifted slightly. How have you achieved this level of gravitational manipulation? Our analysis suggested you were at least a century from such capabilities." "Your analysis was flawed," Ramirez stated simply. "We will be continuing our project as planned. You may observe, but any interference will be considered an act of aggression against Earth." After the communication ended, a strange silence filled the control center. For 18 months they had worked in relative anonymity. Now the galaxy was watching. "They'll try to stop us," Eliza said quietly. "The Zaldaxians won't accept being technologically surprised by a primitive species." Dominic nodded grimly. "Which is why we need to accelerate everything. How quickly can we implement the atmospheric generation protocols? We're still missing critical nitrogen compounds. The series mining operations are—" An alarm cut through their conversation. On the main display, warning indicators flashed around the Zaldaxian fleet. Energy signatures were building. "They're powering weapon systems," reported the tactical officer, voice tense. "Targeting appears to be our primary compression arrays." Dominic felt ice in his veins. Without those arrays, the protoplanet's structure would begin to lose cohesion. 18 months of work would literally fall apart. "Activate defensive countermeasures," he ordered, "and get me Director Ramirez immediately." The next few hours became a blur of crisis management. The Zaldaxians hadn't fired yet, but their threatening posture had triggered emergency protocols throughout the project. Earth's defense fleet, previously held in reserve, now moved into protective positions around the construction zones. In Nananaindo, an emergency session of the Shadow Council, displayed on screens throughout Prometheus, Minister Okonkwo's voice carried the weight of history. "We always knew this moment might come," she said. "The question before us is simple. Do we stand down to avoid conflict, or do we demonstrate that humanity will no longer be dictated to by species who consider us lesser beings?" The vote was unanimous. Project Defiance would continue. 3 days later, Dominic stood before his assembled team. Sleep-deprived and stress-worn, they nonetheless watched him with unwavering attention. "The diplomatic situation has stabilized temporarily," he informed them. "The Galactic Council has issued an official censure but stopped short of authorizing intervention. We have a narrow window to accomplish something they believe impossible." He activated the main display, showing the revised construction timeline. "We're implementing Operation Breakout. From this moment forward, we operate at maximum capacity. Our new target is to achieve basic planetary functionality within 14 months instead of 3 years." Murmurs spread through the assembled engineers and scientists. The timeline seemed impossible. "I know what you're thinking," Dominic continued, "that we're pushing beyond what's safe or reasonable. You're right, but remember why we started this project. Not just to build a planet, but to demonstrate that humanity belongs among the stars on our own terms. Not as supplicants begging for recognition." He pointed to the distant image of their growing world. "That is no longer just a project. It's becoming our statement to the galaxy. Let's make sure it's one they never forget." As the team dispersed to their stations, Eliza remained behind. "You really think we can do this? Create a functioning planet in just over a year?" Dominic's expression was resolute. "We have to. The Zaldaxians have called an emergency session of the Galactic Council for 6 months from now. Director Ramirez believes they'll seek authorization for direct intervention at that point. So, it's a race." "It always has been," Dominic replied, turning back to the viewport. "We need to create something too impressive to destroy, too valuable to dismantle. We need to make our artificial world so extraordinary that even our detractors will be forced to acknowledge its significance." In the months that followed, humanity's determination manifested in extraordinary ways. The global economy reoriented almost entirely toward supporting Project Defiance. Children played with new Earth toys. Universities created specialized programs in planetary engineering. What had begun as a secret government initiative became a symbol of human aspiration. And 300 million kilometers away, a new world continued to take shape, growing larger and more complex with each passing day, observed with increasing alarm by the species that had once laughed at humanity's cosmic ambitions. The planet that changed everything. "Atmospheric retention has stabilized at 93%, reported Dr. Narayan, unable to keep the triumph from her voice. "Core dynamics are self-sustaining and the magnetosphere is fully operational." The observation deck of Prometheus Station erupted in cheers and applause. After 28 months of relentless work, countless technical crises, and 3 tense diplomatic standoffs, they had achieved what many still considered impossible: creating a functioning planet from raw materials. Dominic Wilson allowed himself a moment to absorb the accomplishment. He had aged a decade in less than 3 years, his once dark hair now predominantly gray. Deep lines etched around his eyes from constant stress and minimal sleep. But in this moment, watching the latest images stream in from Defiance, as everyone now called their artificial world, every sacrifice seemed worth it. "It's beautiful," murmured Director Ramirez, who had arrived from Earth the previous day for this milestone. The holographic display showed a sphere approximately 60% of Earth's size, with swirling weather patterns forming above a carefully engineered surface of oceans and continents. Beneath a protective atmospheric layer, automated terraform systems were already preparing the surface for eventual habitation. "The Zaldaxian delegation is requesting permission to dock," announced the communications officer. "Ambassador Drelk insists on seeing the control center personally." Ramirez straightened his formal uniform. "Grant permission. It's time they witnessed what humanity has accomplished up close." When the Zaldaxian ambassador entered Prometheus control an hour later, the atmosphere tensed noticeably. This was the same being who had openly mocked humanity's capabilities less than 3 years earlier. Now his 7 eye stalks swiveled rapidly, taking in the advanced technology and displays. "Ambassador Drelk," Ramirez greeted formally. "Welcome to Prometheus Station." The translation device conveyed the alien's response with less emotional inflection than his body language suggested. Director Ramirez, my government has instructed me to conduct a final inspection before the emergency Galactic Council session tomorrow. Of course, Chief Engineer Wilson will provide a complete technical briefing. For the next 3 hours, Dominic led the Zaldaxian delegation through detailed presentations on every aspect of Defiance's construction and current status. He noted with satisfaction how the aliens' initial skepticism gradually transformed into reluctant admiration as the scale and sophistication of the achievement became undeniable. The gravitational harmonization systems exceed anything currently deployed in the Zaldaxian sphere, one of the alien scientists admitted, studying the specifications. How did you develop this technology so rapidly? Dominic smiled thinly. Perhaps your species underestimated our capabilities. As the tour concluded, Ambassador Drelk requested a private meeting with Director Ramirez. From the adjacent room, Dominic and the senior staff watched the interaction through one-way glass. Your demonstration is impressive, the Zaldaxian conceded, his formal diplomatic demeanor restored. However, the Council remains concerned about a species with your limited interstellar experience wielding planetary engineering capabilities. Ramirez's expression remained impassive. What is the Council proposing, Ambassador? A compromise. Earth will immediately halt further development of Defiance. In exchange, the Council will grant provisional observer status. Not full membership, but a significant advancement of your position. The room held its collective breath. Observer status had been humanity's desperate goal for decades. Now it was being offered as a concession. Ramirez allowed the silence to stretch uncomfortably before responding. 3 years ago, I might have accepted that offer with gratitude, Ambassador. Today, I must decline. The Zaldaxian's eye stalks froze in what humans had learned indicated shock. You decline? Project Defiance will continue as planned. Phase 3. Activation begins tomorrow. Gravitational field harmonization with the Jovian system, followed by completion of the surface engineering. This is unacceptable, the alien's translator conveyed with rare emotional intensity. The Council, Ramirez interrupted calmly, is welcome to send representatives to witness our progress. In fact, Earth is preparing a formal invitation for a permanent Galactic Council observation post on Defiance itself. You cannot seriously believe. What I believe, Ambassador, is that the dynamic between Earth and the galactic community has fundamentally changed. We are no longer petitioning for acknowledgement. We are extending an invitation to witness what humanity has accomplished and what we plan to achieve next. After the Zaldaxian delegation departed, Dominic found Ramirez alone in the observation dome, staring at the distant glimmer that was Defiance. That was risky, Dominic observed. They could still decide to intervene forcefully. Ramirez nodded. They could, but I'm betting they won't. Not anymore. He turned to face the engineer. You've given humanity something beyond a new planet, Wilson. You've given us leverage. The emergency Galactic Council session, broadcasted throughout human territory the following day, proved Ramirez correct. The council chambers, normally dominated by the dismissive attitudes of elder species, had transformed. Earth's representatives no longer sat in the observer section, but occupied a special position near the main council table. Ambassador Drelk presented his inspection findings with noticeable restraint. The human project designated Defiance represents an unexpected level of technological achievement. While concerns remain about the precedent of unilateral planetary engineering, our technical assessment indicates the project meets safety parameters and poses no immediate threat to stellar stability. The Varelian representative, whose condescension had once cut so deeply, now spoke with careful neutrality. Given these findings, the Varelian confluence recommends a reconsideration of Earth's status within the galactic community. For 6 hours, the council debated. Species that had previously ignored humanity now studied the technical specifications of Defiance with evident interest. Trade representatives from a dozen worlds quietly approached Earth's delegation with proposals for technological exchange. The Council's final resolution stunned even the most optimistic humans. Earth would be granted provisional membership status, not full Council rights, but far beyond the observer role they had long sought. In exchange, Earth would agree to share certain aspects of their gravitational manipulation technology and accept limited oversight of Defiance's final development phases. On Prometheus Station, the news triggered celebrations throughout the habitat. Rings. Engineers who had worked themselves to exhaustion for years embraced and wept. In the command center, Dominic and Eliza watched the distant world they had created, now visible even to the naked eye as a small bluish dot near Jupiter. Was it worth it? Eliza asked quietly. Everything we sacrificed to build this? Dominic considered the question seriously. Ask me again in 50 years. But today? Yes. Absolutely yes. 1 month later, Dominic stood beside Director Ramirez on the surface of Defiance itself, breathing air generated by the atmospheric processors they had designed. Above them, the vast engineering dome protected the first settlement area, a scientific outpost that would soon expand into humanity's second homeworld. Representatives from 26 alien species had gathered for the formal inauguration ceremony. Many had traveled enormous distances, drawn by reports of the impossible achievement of a primitive species. When we began this project, Ramirez addressed the assembled dignitaries, his voice carrying across the carefully terraformed landscape. We were motivated by frustration at being dismissed, at being told what humanity could not achieve. But something transformed during these 3 years. He gestured to the vast vista beyond the settlement dome, where automated systems continued to shape mountains and carve river valleys. Defiance began as a statement of refusal, our refusal to accept limitations imposed by others. It has become something more profound, a demonstration of what is possible when a species decides to reshape its destiny. The Zaldaxian ambassador, now accompanied by 3 members of the High Directorate, approached after the ceremony. Your species has surprised us, the senior Zaldaxian admitted, eye stalks moving in what humans now recognized as a gesture of respect. The Council has existed for 12,000 years. In that time we have developed expectations about developmental patterns. Humanity has not followed these patterns. We tend to be unpredictable, Ramirez acknowledged. Indeed. This quality may prove valuable in the challenges facing our galaxy. The alien hesitated, then added, The Directorate has authorized me to extend an invitation. We would welcome human scientists at our primary research facilities. There is much we might learn from each other. As the alien dignitaries departed, Dominic found himself alone at the edge of the settlement, looking out over the world he had helped create. In the artificially accelerated twilight, lights were coming on in the research outposts scattered across the first habitable zone. Director Ramirez joined him, offering a container of celebratory champagne brought from Earth for the occasion. To Defiance, Ramirez said, raising his container, and to properly calibrated insubordination. Dominic laughed and raised his own drink. To building what they said we couldn't. They stood in companionable silence, watching the stars appear in Defiance's engineered sky. Finally, Ramirez spoke again. The Shadow Council met yesterday. We've approved the preliminary plans for your next project. Dominic raised an eyebrow. Next project? I thought I might get a vacation first. Ramirez smiled. Eventually. But first, there's the matter of Venus. The Council thinks it's time. We demonstrated that we can transform existing planets as well as build new ones. Terraforming Venus? That's considered nearly impossible. Nearly impossible, Ramirez agreed, which seems to be humanity's speciality now. In the distance, transport ships were arriving with the first wave of scientists and engineers who would establish permanent operations on Defiance. Above them, a mixed fleet of human and alien vessels maintained position, their lights visible as moving stars across the darkening sky, silent testimony to humanity's changed position in the cosmic order. 3 years ago, Dominic mused, They laughed at us for not having built a planet. Now they're studying how we did it. And that, Ramirez concluded, is how you answer an insult, not with anger, but with achievement so profound it transforms the conversation entirely. As night fell completely on humanity's newest world, the artificial planet Defiance continued its carefully calculated orbit, a permanent monument to what becomes possible when a species decides it will no longer accept the limitations others place upon it and chooses instead to build something that changes everything.